and welcome to my series called Clean Out or Cleaning Out Congress. My name is Suri Crowe. I am an independent journalist, and I am thrilled this morning to have Ms. Kina Collins, who is running for Illinois District 7 for Congress. And I'm so excited to have you joining me this morning. And it looks like we've got lots of people here. There's so much I actually want to talk to you about, Kina. So welcome this morning, and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Suri, for having me on. I'm so excited. I'm a really big fan, and I know you're going to ask me the tough questions, so thank you.
Well, just to give people background, part of this series that I just started, I interviewed Zasheen Hafiz from Texas yesterday. I want to platform people who are willing to make bold changes in Congress because as a reporter and as a citizen, I've just seen some real stagnation in Congress on the Democratic side. And it kind of breaks my heart to say that, but it just seems like we're kind of locked in sort of a stronghold from Congress and lobbyists and donors. And as a reporter, I pay a lot of attention to what voters want. And obviously, we're not in a very good situation in America right now. I mean, that's an understatement. And so I'm looking for people who are going to run and represent people who are willing to listen to what the voters want. And so that's why you have a huge fan. Her name is Nicole, and she called attention to you, and she's like, "You've got to talk to Kina Collins." And I was like, "Okay." And I looked over your platform. So that's what I hope to do as we head into these midterms. But I know this is your third time running for this seat in District 7. Is that correct?
Yes, it's my fourth time.
Your fourth time. Okay. Well, fourth time's the charm. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about today, Kina, because I think this is really just timely impression, is Benjamin Netanyahu just landed in D.C. again it feels like he's now coming to do his check-ins with Trump on almost like a quarterly basis. I don't remember a time when he has ever visited D.C. so many times. And also, I found it interesting and not entirely just coincidental that on the day that Bibi Netanyahu arrives in DC, that AIPAC's Instagram account was banned. And I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. And so just showing the power of these corporations that are tied into with the AIPAC lobby. And I saw that last night and I was like, what? The AIPAC tracker? And for those of you who don't know what the AIPAC tracker is, AIPAC tracker tracks members of Congress who are receiving donations from the AIPAC lobby, which is the pro-Israel, pro-Zionist lobby, and they pay a ton of money. We're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars into Congress, not just on the Republican side, y'all, but also to Democrats. And a lot of these Democrats appear very friendly to people. And I don't know if I want to start name checking, but just push me a little bit and I will. Cory Booker, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, Kirsten Gillibrand, my own two senators. And they really direct a lot of the congressional decisions that are made, not just on the Republican side, but on Democrat side. And I know that, Kina, you just recently received the gold star or the green star from AIPAC Tracker, which is 0 donations from the AIPAC lobby. So what do you make of that? Just tell me what your experience is with that in terms of refusing to take AIPAC dollars, because I know that's the way that they kind of bankroll a lot of congressional candidates into Congress.
Yeah, so a couple of things, and thank you for highlighting that, Suri. Our district just got their APAC endorsed candidate in our run. 35 days out from the election, they have selected a candidate in our race to pump $2.8 million into the airwaves, so 500K per week leading up to election day. So that is how much we are up against. And the litmus test for Citizens Against AIPAC, which is the AIPAC tracker group that endorses, is that not only that you don't take AIPAC money, but that you call out the genocide that is happening to the Palestinian people. And for me, that's not a policy point. That's a morality point. And it should be very simple for us to say as Americans, we do not want to use our dollars to kill innocent civilians. In terms of them shutting their page down, we are in an age of suppression. We are in an age of authoritarianism here in the United States. It is not coming. It has already arrived. And everybody should be outraged by that. and the suppression of the First Amendment right, for you to speak openly about what you agree and disagree with in this government. But we know the tactics that are being mirrored from people from Israel. Anybody who criticizes Israel is slapped with being anti-Semitic. And I reject the notion that holding a government accountable makes you anti-Semitic or makes you hateful towards an entire group of people. No, it makes you accountable. It's an accountability metric, and no government is above that critique.
Yeah, I love what you just said there. And I think it's particularly impactful coming from a woman and a woman of color because there is a gaslighting that goes on. I know that I feel it as a journalist that anytime you speak out against the atrocities that the Israeli government, to be clear, is committing in Palestine, there is like a, oh my gosh, you are a horrible person. You are anti-Semitic. Look what you're saying. So I think coming from you, that has a particular weight. And, they have really managed to make this, almost like blackballing people, citizens, journalists who say it. And how do we fight back against this?
I mean, we keep speaking truth to power. In 2024, when we ran previously, I was the only candidate in the entire state of Illinois that APAC spent money against, opposing to come into the congressional seat, half over $500,000 to keep us out of the Illinois 7 congressional seat. And I think that you stand firm and you continue to speak up about that because I think if the idea is that if they can scare people off or beat them down enough, then they won't come back. And so it's important in this time now as we're in community and we're organizing and people are doing mutual aid and they are doing protests and they are doing the No Kings rallies that you speak up. And I think that this is a lot of disinformation and misinformation that gets spread, particularly around the idea that you're anti-Semitic for critiquing Israel. Mind you, there are Christians who live in Israel. There are Muslims who live in Israel. So the issue that I take with it is the erasure of those voices as well. And Israel, when we talk about what their government is doing, but ultimately we can't be fooled by that, right? Like there is in our country a constitution. There is a fiscal budget. That budget is funded with our tax dollars. And when you are doing the funding with your money, you have every right to hold these elected officials accountable to not operate as an agent for another country and to operate in the self interest of your community. I live on the west side of Chicago, which is a heavily impacted, divested community here in the city of Chicago. We deal with crime, we deal with violence, we deal with medical apartheid and food deserts, right? We are constantly told that there is not enough money. There's not enough money to keep our schools open. There are not enough money to build up a strong local economy. There's not enough money for you to get primary care and in the healthcare system that we are living in. But there's always money for war. There's always money for bombs. And so it's really hard for me to make that case to working class families here in the Illinois 7 that we should continue to do that.
Yeah, you make a great point there. I collectively speaking, I mean, we're constantly told we've got to cut education, we've got cutting SNAP, which probably matters quite a bit in the district that you're running. And I mean, it does across the country, but we don't have enough money for SNAP. We've got to cut, Head Start programs, all of these things that matter to everyday Americans, education, healthcare. I mean, can we just let's
Housing,
get in? Yeah, pardon? Housing,
housing.
housing. We don't have enough money for housing. We don't have enough money for healthcare, but we are committed as a government to sending more than $8 billion a year to Israel. I mean, it blows my mind. And if you say anything about it, you're labeled anti-Semitic. It is something
I
that I
mean,
am like crazy about as a journalist.
aside
Go
from
ahead.
that, the egregious part is that groups that act on behalf of folks in the pro-Israel lobby, the folks who act on behalf of that, the fact that they think they could come and run roughshod through these primaries is, I think there's a strong argument to be made that it did cost us last November. Even for the more moderate and centrist Democrats,
Oh.
this constant messaging of using Republican talking points and Democratic primaries is ridiculous. And I'll give you an example. When APAC attacked me, it was primarily because I called for a ceasefire immediately, and I was actually arrested outside of the Israeli consulate with 130 other people calling for a ceasefire a month after the October 7th attacks because we knew that this would be a bombing campaign against the Palestinian people. There was no way for them to get out, and we wanted our government to use diplomacy instead of violence. Long story short, the attacks that they used was that I was a defund the police candidate because I called for the abolition of ICE all the way back in 2020, right? So the tactics that the pro-Israel lobby is about. Uh-oh, can you see me?
No, I can. Yeah. Okay, go on. The pro-Israel lobby, you were saying.
Yeah, so the tactics that they're using, groups like AIPAC are using, is not about the war that's happening, or excuse me, the genocide that is happening in Palestine. It is about a bunch of other talking points that have been created by Republicans, quite frankly, to make candidates look scary, to make them look unsafe for their community, when all the while, the unsafe thing is that we are investing more in war than we are in these communities, in the quality of life for people who live in these communities. And so I just always think that's interesting. The attacks they use, those same attacks on Cori Bush, on Jamal Bowman. It's never about what their actual pack is standing for. They're a pro-Israel pack, right?
Mhm.
They never talk about foreign affairs in these mailers. They only talk about dog whistles. And so I think that that's important to highlight the hypocrisy, that you can come into a Black district like Illinois 7 and say that I'm unsafe for my community, um, because I want to invest in my community, but we can't critique Israel, right? Like that. I mean, it's just a double standard. And I think that more people need to call it out.
Yeah. How is that message being received amongst your potential constituents, and how are you tying that in? Because of course we know that historically with Black communities, there is a fear of police, and right now, I mean, look at the terror that's being like inflicted by ICE agents. So how are you handling that? And moving forward, how do you think that should be handled? I mean, Chicago dealt with a big influx of ICE, and now Minnesota's essentially under occupation.
I mean, our district became ground zero for these ICE raids. The Broadview ICE facility that's caught all these national headlines is in the Illinois 7th Congressional District. And coincidentally, Siri, it's in a little small, quiet Black suburb, right? Like these folks didn't even know that that was an ICE processing center until all of these protesters and cameras and state police started to show up and ICE agents. So they were caught off guard in the same way that a lot of people on the ground just at large were caught off guard with Operation Midway Blitz. And so the Black community knows very well about police brutality and the lack of police accountability and what that does to a community. And we've lived in a world without ICE, right? And I think that above all, Black voters in particular, they don't want law enforcement coming into our communities breaking the law, which is exactly what ICE agents are doing. And so for them, it is a safety concern. The way I talk to a lot of voters is that ICE is the fifth most well funded militia in the globe right now, right? Like it's a small army, and we don't know in a year what that's going to look like for vulnerable frontline communities like Black communities, where they will turn on us as well, right? They're saying that they're looking for the bad guys, but that hasn't been who they've harmed. They have ripped families from each other. They have ripped children from their parents. They have harmed the elderly, the ill, those who are sick, those who are disabled. And those folks are cut off once they are in these ICE processing centers. They're essentially cut off from the rest of us, right? Which makes it hard for us to galvanize around them. And my community doesn't agree with that. And so there's been a huge pushback on ICE here in the state of Illinois, but particularly in Black and Brown communities across the Illinois 7.
And what is your position on ICE? Is it reform and do more rules for ICE, or is it abolish ICE? You want to share where do you stand on that?
It's abolish DHS and its totality, right? You cannot reform this, what they're doing, people have been calling for the abolition of ICE all the way back in 2002, right? When I was in elementary school. And it has progressively gotten worse from that time. And so, as I stated, we took the political hits as a campaign about that because I called for the abolition of ICE all the way back in 2019,
Mhm.
2020, um, because we knew that there was no oversight. We knew that they were barging into people's home with no knock warrants and harming people, and they were targeting the wrong people to begin with, right? And so there is far more efficient ways that we could be dealing with immigration in our country, and those are the forms that I like to focus on, like immigration courts. Let's invest our money in and moving the process along for people to get their visas, to get what they need in immigration courts instead of just throwing more paperwork um, at this problem and more policing. We're not going to be able to police our way out of a messy immigration system in the United States of America. And I'm actually appalled that even after all of this evidence, we still have elected officials, even Democrats, might I add, who are thanking ICE, voting to thank ICE, voting to send more money um, to this very racist police tactical unit.
It is wild. I mean, I have to tell you, like, I'm in Virginia and I'm like, what the heck? What are we doing? I mean, just from an objective standpoint, if you look at the fact that, they're saying, let's add more cameras, take their masks off, which, okay, yes, they should not be masked, obviously, because that's a way to hide their identity. But they're so bold and brazen. I mean, what I'm going to be working on today when I'm done with this is I'm going to be really digging into what's happening in Minnesota, because going back to how you and I started our conversation about what these large platforms are doing, suppressing APAC tracker. I mean, removing APAC tracker's Instagram account. Like, I shouldn't be surprised, but that's on a Mark Zuckerberg owned platform. It's also, they are
Mhm.
really, really, the algorithms are suppressing the news and information about what's happening in Minnesota. And from what I understand, people are like, this is a city that is under occupation, and the news, it's getting suppressed, and we're not hearing about it now. We're hearing about a lot of other things. So you see that the way that these oligarchs work together. And going back to what you were saying, I, you know, I mean, one of the things that I strongly encourage people to do is call your elected officials. Like, I know it, but call. They count the phone calls, and just light up their phone lines. But I am calling my senators all the time. Like, what are y'all doing? Like, seriously,
I mean,
what are
I
you
mean,
doing?
it goes beyond that though, Siri, because we're now seeing journalists being arrested,
Yeah,
right? So it's also suppression to shut down social media platforms for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
But we all should be alarmed. So oftentimes in these races, you'll see people will ask at candidates forums or what have you, what are the things that people can work across the aisle on? This is one of those things. We're talking about the suppression of our First Amendment right, which opens the door for violations of other rights, right? And it has gone beyond the pale. Like, it's not just about people making their comments or telling their stories on social media. It's actual credible journalists being thrown in jail and being indicted, federally indicted, right?
So, yeah, yeah. The day
For
that
doing their
Georgia Fort,
jobs.
Don Lemon, I can't remember the other ones. I don't want to mess up their names, but yes, four in one day, all journalists of color. That that that
Independent journalists.
ind
Independent journalists, right? So it's not that they're just journalists. These are independent journalists who are bringing you news straight
who are,
from the ground,
because
right?
they're
They're
the
not
ones telling the
editing,
truth. Because
right?
the corporate reporters are under, they have bent the knee. I'm not blaming them individually, but corporate media cannot be trusted any longer. Not, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's exactly what's happening. Is that the
Yeah, I mean,
independent journalists are telling the truth.
yeah, so what can people do? People can become, their own storyteller on their platforms. I think that you continue to amplify it. Yes, contact your legislators as well. And for folks who are in red states and who have Republicans, contact them too. The one thing that the Republican Party is really good at is that strategy. They will call a Democrat in a New York minute, and say, "Hey, this is what I want you to vote on." And I think that we have to get that independents, Democrats, Green Party, Democratic Socialists, we have to get that same energy about us that in all the spaces we are lifting up and highlighting that this is wrong and it's unconstitutional.
Yeah. Do you think that do you think that that's a problem on the left side? Is that we're not energized or motivated enough?
I don't even necessarily think that it's not that we're not energized and motivated. I think that we're disorganized. We have allowed for a lot of corporate Dems also to feed us the talking points that were generated through Republican echo chambers. And so for years we have been hammered with this respectability politics, and we have to burn the playbook on that. The rules have completely changed. This is not, you know, this is not the Republicans of the '90s, and even the Republicans and the Democrats of the '90s were awful, right? We have to remind people that some of this legislation that was put forth was put that is awful was put forth with Democrats in positions of power. So we, in order to develop that voice, we have to challenge our own party and we have to challenge the other side. But to me, I think that's how we expand and we grow as an electorate and as a coalition. The pipeline to me is not MAGA to Democrat. We've seen it happen with people like Zoran Mondani, who flipped MAGA Republicans to his side. The pipeline is from the non-voter to the voter. What we saw in the previous election cycle was that Donald Trump was not elected on some mandate.
Mhm.
He was elected because his base was more fired up, and Democrats and people who lean left sat it out. They felt like they had nothing to believe in. Oops, sorry.
That's okay.
They had nothing to believe in, and we were not fighting for the things that the everyday person would like their politician to fight for. And the hypocrisy. You can't say that you're going to take on Donald Trump as a billionaire and you take corporate PAC money,
Mm.
right? You can't say that we deserve health care and then y'all are bankrolled by private insurance companies that killed the Medicare for All bill constantly every session. And so people are seeing right through that. And so for me, the pipeline as we argue, I mean, excuse me, as we organize, once again, is not Republican to Democrat. It's turning the non-voter into the voter and giving people something to believe in.
And how do you do that? Like what has been your position as you've moved through this run for Illinois 7?
Well, first off, you have to speak with a moral authority. You have to be able to have a strong moral compass and moral authority on it. So we've rejected all corporate PAC money in our campaign. That means that the viewpoints and the issues and the platforms that we talk about are coming straight and directly from the people in our district. A good chunk and a high value of my small dollar individual donations come from inside of our district. So these are the people who, I am responding to. I think that we need to stop pedestalizing politicians. Politicians are not celebrities. They are public servants. They are your employees and they work for you, not the other way around. We get to the point, this is a big issue when we talk about politicians who become entrenched. They become so wildly popular that
Mhm.
it's almost impossible to remove them from these seats. And so they're not afraid of us. That is what it comes down to. So I always tell people stop turning politicians into celebrities as well. And we have to remind people that you could be a great supporter of our campaign, but you also have to hold me accountable in the process. And so, and then I think finally, you talk about centering the voices of working class families. What are the issues that impact working class families? A universal health single payer healthcare system, Medicare for all. It's erasing the debt, like student loan debt and medical debt that strap people down. We know this is taking up a lot of their checks, making their cost of living affordable. 40 to 60% of some people's checks are going towards rent and mortgage, and I mean it eats up all of their ability to live a quality of life that provides them the ability to thrive instead of just survive.
How do you
So
change that? How do you get, I mean, rents and housing lower, I mean, more affordable? Because that is a huge issue. I mean, that impacts my everyday life. It's like, wow, I just paid my whole paycheck to rent, you know.
I mean, on the federal level, we have to start making billionaires and millionaires pay their fair share. That's ultimately, legislation that
So
we
many
have to
things
do.
to fix.
But we can also implement and fight to bring back things like the child tax credit. right? Where it reduced childhood poverty in half, right? We can invest in a green economy. Those are things we could do immediately. We know that that building these strong local economies and bringing those good paying union jobs that are green energy jobs into neighborhoods and communities like Illinois 7, which used to be a manufacturing hub, could change the entire trajectory of not just our district, but of our state. Right. And so you have to advocate and fight for those things. I think in the immediate, as we have a Trump regime in the White House, we are going to have representatives across the country are going to have to work in tandem, particularly in blue states, with their governor and counties and their municipal electeds, to really pull the resources and advocate for those things to get to constituents as quickly as possible. But I mean, on the federal level, there are several things that we could be doing. We could be eliminating student loan debt. Truly, that would free up so much of our GDP if people didn't have that debt attached to them. We could, once again, I want to reiterate this, not be straddling people in medical debt. And I think that we don't talk about that enough. We can hold landlords and corporate landlords accountable to lower the rent for a lot of people and freeze rent, right? Across major cities and even in rural areas. So there's a ton that we could be doing. It just requires political courage that our Congress just does not have right now.
No, and why do you I mean, I'm gonna ask you this, why do you think that is? Why do they not have that courage?
I mean, I think that it's corruption. The biggest issue that we have in Washington, D.C. is giant corporations that have our government by the throat. And they have declawed the ability for our representatives to go there and throw down on behalf of the people. And this is why we have to run non traditional candidates, working class candidates, people who are not a part of the political elite, right? I don't come from a prestigious political background. I come from two manufacturing union workers. That's how my political praxis was formed in the world. And so the things that I value and I care about vastly different than the makeup of our Congress, which is mostly men, mostly white men, mostly attorneys, and mostly like wealthy white male attorneys. Right? So they have a very different outlook of the world and an experience that, in my opinion, does not reflect the average American who is clamoring for this sense of urgency for them to actually get something done in this country. And so support your local candidates who are not your traditional type of candidates who they would select for these seats.
Yeah, and as you were talking, I was thinking of, some people who started out the way that you did, humble beginnings, so to speak. Maybe even people of color. I can't trying to think of many women. Sadly, I can't because we need more. But after so many years, my oh my, how their tune changes. So, how do you feel about term limits? I mean, because what happens is people get into Congress and the huge amounts of corporate and lobbyist money, they are,
Mhm.
for whatever reason, it's not for me to judge, unable to resist that. And they may talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk.
Well, I mean, it's the basic talking points. Yes, we need term limits, right? I just seen the video that's circulating on social media about Susan Collins and how she
Oh,
was
I'm
advocating for term
only
limits
going
as
to
a
be here for
young.
2 terms. Yeah.
Right, I'm only gonna be here for 2 terms, and then it turned into more, so we do need the term limits to be implemented, but we also need to end Citizens United, right? We need to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to end gerrymandering, where we are seeing these politicians choose their voters instead of the voters choosing who will represent them. And so there are so many things and layers once we peel it back that it's not just the term limits. It's the big money in politics, it's the gerrymandering, it's the fact that at the highest levels of office, they have lifetime appointments. I believe the Supreme Court should have term limits, right? To it. I believe that um, we have to pass the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We have to abolish the Electoral College, right? There's a ton of things that we need to be doing to reform our democracy, and it's so fragile right now,
Mm.
that this is the time where I think it's an appetite from both Democrats, Republicans, Independents to revisit, like, how do we reform our constitution? How do we strengthen it? How do we actually reform how our democracy is run? And I think that people often forget, Siri, that, like, we are a very young democracy, the United States, and we're at that precipice and that turning point right now where people are like, no, we actually don't want a two-party system. We want a multi-party system, right? We don't actually support what the Democrats are saying or the Republicans are saying. And then it leaves this wide swath of people in the middle who oftentimes don't get invited to the table or do not get included in the political process. But yes, I think that there are a ton of safeguards. I think that, for example, one of the immediate things we could do is implement ranked choice voting and publicly financed campaigns, right, across the board, so that you don't have to spend all your time just sitting talking to these corporate donors or talking to any donors, right? You're out in the streets,
Hmm.
actually talking to the people, talking about your platform. So I'm a
Yeah.
huge advocate for publicly financed campaigns, and I wish that that was a national
Like an AOC type
a
of
national
thing, or
thing.
Bernie type thing, you mean, where they're just funded by their grassroots organization or their
That
donors?
well, yeah, so they're funded, but publicly financed campaigns allow for governments to match your donations.
Okay.
So say, at to a certain level. So say that you give me, $500,
Yeah.
then the government would match that, and give $500 to the campaign. And so then that way it makes it an even playing field,
Right.
and it puts a cap on how much money could be pumped into these elections. And I just think that there are better ways that
Yeah.
we could be running these campaigns. And it would stop the ability for groups like APAC to come in and just blitz these these districts and not give any of the other candidates a shot at doing it. You either have to have a lot of name recognition or a lot of donors in your pocket. And I think that we need to remove the barriers for people to run for these seats.
And they just I could talk to you. I could talk to all of y'all all day. Like it's always when I'm doing these. Like yesterday, I was talking to like I said uh, Shaheen from Texas, but the APAC plays dirty too. They get in and they start stirring up mud that doesn't necessarily come across. If you there's just some stuff happening in Texas. I'm not sure if you I mean, they're mixing it up down there, and it's very backdoor. It's very backdoor the way they'll mix up the mud, and it makes it look like, oh, you're being not only anti-Semitic, but also racist, but it's the way that they play dirty, man. I'm like, wow, it's just a very interesting way that they play. But going along in your district before we go, how are voters reacting? Are they understanding when you're out talking to them? Are they understanding the urgency of the moment? Oh yeah, what are people saying?
I mean, yeah, I think that, initially when I first ran against Congressman Davis, the call to action was that we needed new leadership in the party. And now that has pivoted to we have to save our democracy, right? And so I do think that people are feeling it. I'm hearing more and more on the doors as I run into people. Um, are we going to be able to vote in the midterms?
Hmm.
Right? Are we going to be able to vote in the presidential election? How are we going to collect proper census data when immigrants are petrified that they're going to be deported or detained by ICE? Um, so the conversation of democracy is coming up more and more on the doors in a way that we used to hear about rent or we used to hear about healthcare.
Really?
Now it is, okay, does your campaign have an actual, are you coordinating with any of your opponents to do election protection for, ICE presence at the polls on election? I mean, just things that we had not done in previous election cycles. And in that way, I definitely think that voters are feeling the energy. I mean, excuse me, the urgency. And I also feel that the pendulum is swinging, right? We're seeing Anna Leah Mejia and New Jersey 11, Zoran winning, right?
Yeah.
We're seeing people across these seats um, win in areas that people thought that they could not win. And so I think that people are looking for the underdog. They're looking for the anti-establishment candidate. They're looking for the anti-corporation candidate, and they are feeling the urgency.
They're understand because we talk about some of the apathy that happened, as you mentioned, in 2024, where a lot of people just sat it out. Like, "Nah, I'm not going to bother." So that's why I'm wondering if, a lot has changed in a year. Are people understanding the urgency? And then, okay,
Yeah, and I mean, I think we're seeing uptick of, voter turnout. I mean, in our district, for example, they had municipal suburban elections last spring, and we saw an increase in the influx in turnout. And I think that we are going to see that in the March primary. I think the question becomes, does it become suppressed because ICE will potentially show up here in the state of Illinois? Um, and so I definitely think the hunger is there for sure.
yeah, that is concerning. Real quick. So somebody is saying that they believe that the Supreme Court should always have 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats. Also, an enforceable ethics code for the Supreme Court. For heaven's sakes, what's your response to that?
Yes, I think that first of all, let me just speak to the ethics. There are other countries who have ethics boards that they implement for their version of the Supreme Court. And it should be heavily invested in here because we know that federal judgeships and the Supreme Court seats are lifetime appointments. So, and it's very hard to remove them from those positions. Um, so I'm all for the expansion of the Supreme Court right now, and B, a full investment in ethics, an ethics board and oversight. We're seeing the Supreme Court lose their credibility because they are they're being courted by the same corporate donors of as the Trump political organization, to the point that their spouses think that they can interfere on legal precedent that's being set by the Supreme Court. And I think that that sets a very dangerous precedent across the board for Americans. We're seeing the gutting of civil rights right before our eyes.
Mhm.
They started with affirmative action, DEI. I mean, they're going
Roe v.
after voting
Wade.
rights.
Yeah, I mean, well,
Dobbs' decision
yeah,
to gut Roe versus Wade.
yeah.
I mean, we are in for the fight of our lives, and it's going to take decades. I don't think that people are understanding that it is going to take decades for us to undo all of the unraveling of our civil rights that are happening, and it's exactly because of what your viewer talked about, the lack of ethics oversight.
Yeah. I mean, they just thumb their nose literally at the Constitution. I mean, what's so frustrating is you see the lower federal benches making good decisions in many cases, even Trump appointees, and it gets to SCOTUS, and they're like, nah, just what?
I mean, elections have consequences, but this goes back to what you were saying earlier, Siri, about boldness, having somebody that is bold. And I mean, God bless Ruth Bader Ginsburg for what she did, but she stayed on the bench too long, in my opinion, because it forced President Obama to not be able to add an additional person who would be there for a while. And it gave Trump all of this runway
Oh my
to add
God.
all of these folks. Now, there was pushback for the Obama picks and they obstructed him, no doubt about it. But that goes back to, once again, your point about boldness. Democrats need to take the gloves off.
Yes.
The
We're like,
Republicans
okay.
completely threw the rule book out. They completely threw the rule book out once Trump became president, and all of the same standards that they held the Democrats to, they did not participate in. And so when you say that a sense of urgency and boldness, this is what we're talking about. It's like, take the gloves off. This is the difference between life and death, the ability for women to get proper reproductive health care or for them to bleed out in a parking lot. And they just didn't have that sense of urgency.
Oh my gosh. That's like one of I actually say that line all the time. I love that you just said that. Like, that's like something I frequently say. It is the difference, like literally what you just said. It is the difference between life and death, whether you make it in and receive medical care or bleed out in a parking lot. That is what we are talking about. So what is so frustrating is this, my friend across the aisle, they are not our friends. They are fascists. And they are fascists. They are dismantling democracy in front of us. They are thumbing their nose at law. I mean, look what they're doing with the Epstein files right now. It's just wild. I'm trying to see if there's anyone else. Nicole's
I
posting about your town
mean,
hall. Call me up. Okay. So we need fighters. We need people who are like ready to go and stop chumming it up at the gym, Chuck Schumer. Ah, Like, what do you do? I mean, no, I'm very vocal about this, which is why I started this series. And I want to get more people on because I think it's so critically important for voters to understand what is at stake and why we need people who are ready to go in there and not be polite. This is not a polite tea party, y'all.
Right.
This is our lives. This is healthcare for 24 million Americans that just evaporated because, you know,
Because
what
they
was it,
buckled.
7 yeah, because they buckled. My senator amongst one of them. And
Wow.
I will never get over it. I will never get over it, and I
Well, our
keep saying,
senator too, Dick
uh,
Durbin, our senator,
"Oh,
he's retiring, but
thanks,
our
Dick."
senator too, even in a blue state like Illinois, where it would have been wildly popular for him to hold the line, which he could have done. There would have been no political consequences for him because he's retiring anyway. That is the thing that just really pisses me off is that we get to the point where we're like, well, we're moving in a bipartisan in the name of what? Because there are Republicans who also need health care that y'all just gutted.
Yeah,
And they
like,
pat themselves on the back. And because all of these restrictions and levers of power are put into place that makes these elected officials entrenched, it makes it really hard to beat them.
and
So,
what kind of legacy did he leave, Dick Durbin? I mean, go on. Sorry, it's just, like,
well, to me, I feel like so my background, I didn't get to get in that, but it's in gun violence prevention work.
mm,
And I experienced gun violence firsthand here on the west side of Chicago. And I always tell people that organizing chose me. I did not choose it.
mm,
And I think that the way that we view gun violence, for example, in this country is very racialized and it's very different. When we have a mass shooting in our community, we do not get resources. we get um we get ostracized, we get talked about, we get stereotyped. When mass shootings happen in the suburbs, there is a pomp and circumstance that goes along with that. But on that point, that through line, what I'm trying to make is when our government allowed entire classrooms of second graders to be sprayed down by guns and they did nothing to fix it. That let me know everything that I needed to know
yeah,
about our government officials
mhm,
and how much courage they lack.
yeah,
And so this is not, to me, this is not just a left and right thing
mhm,
or a Democrat and Republican thing. This is a right and wrong thing.
mm.
And they don't have the same political praxis as some of us who are feeling the urgency in our communities. But that to the point of Dick Durbin, you know, he has made several decisions in the latter years of his career that have made me scratch my head because it's wildly popular here in the state of Illinois to hold the line on things like healthcare. So that was incredibly frustrating for a lot of us.
Yeah, I mean, and so, he's saying a lot of these congressional people have, based on their votes, have blood in their hands. Well, yeah, and I mean, just to underscore your point, Sandy Hook, that was it. I was like, if we're not willing to throw ourselves down for second graders, I still get chills. Like, it. I mean, if
I
that
mean,
wasn't,
Uvalde,
if,
Texas,
yeah, Uvalde.
Parkland. I mean, we could go down the list. Uvalde, Texas, Parkland, all of these schools
Mhm.
that are filled with these students who are traumatized for the rest of their lives.
Generational
And
trauma.
once again, the where is the priority? Our budget, our fiscal budget is a living, breathing moral document. This is a policy choice that is being made when we say we don't want to invest in trauma informed care, wraparound services, but we want to invest in war to go traumatize even more children in countries that we will never go to. Right. And so this is violence in itself is cyclical and it's retaliatory, but it's also very telling where our investment is that we feel a need to expand the Pentagon budget, but they can't pass the audit and haven't passed the audit in 8 years,
Facts.
right? So they get a raise and they get an expansion in the budget even when they don't ask for it.
Mhm.
But once again, we are saying that we do not have the resources in our community that we need. We
For
can't
care.
protect Social Security.
Yeah.
We can't protect the things that people have paid into and would put their sweat equity into. And so for me, yeah, like I said, this is the fight of our lives, and it's being exacerbated under Trump. But I want to be clear, he's a symptom to a larger problem that
Yeah.
we've always had in the United States, which is that the fight is not horizontal, right? It's not to the left of you and to the right of you. It's vertical, it's up and down. All the people at the top who have all of these resources, and all of us at the bottom who do not.
Have nothing.
So we need to just be clear about that.
Yeah, and it really is. It's like you said. It's and I don't know if you ever watch the IHIP ladies, but I've noticed like it is not a whole lot of us out here, but it is independent folks who are like we need moral clarity. And Ro Khan has been talking about this too. Like before we get anywhere else, we need to just establish that we have a moral clarity that pedophiles are bad, that people who hurt women and children are bad. Like as a Democrat Party or wherever we move to next, we just need to establish a foundation that we need to provide medical care, education, and food to our people. Like, I mean, before we go on, okay, what's Nicole saying? He was so concerned with getting rid of certain vape juices for the big tobacco that he ignored. Oh, that's dicta. Nicole's my new friend. Nicole, you might not have been on here when Keena and I started talking, but I told her that you were her super fan and that she called attention, and so I'm thrilled because yeah. So I mean, there's a lot to talk about, but I think just to wrap it up, like how are you feeling going into? Do you have a primary in March? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our primary is March 17th. That is our election. Our district is a D plus 34 district, which means we vote 34 points above the Republicans. This is the most progressive district in the Midwest. It is the fifth most Democratic district in the nation. There's no excuse not to send a progressive champion to the seat. Whoever wins in March ultimately goes on to win in November. I mean, unless something horribly goes wrong. In November, which it won't. So our district is at a really interesting turning point where we're getting a new congressperson, and I think it will shape for a generation what this district is going to prioritize and the fights that we're going to fight on the national level. My platform is clear. We are a no corporate grassroots funded people powered campaign that is focused on solving the solutions for working class people like the ones who live in our district. That means Medicare for all. That means raising the federal minimum wage that hasn't been touched since 2009. That means housing is a human right? Holding corporate landlords accountable for jacking up the prices for people to have a place to live. That means closing the death gap that exists in our district between Streeterville and West Englewood, a 30-year life gap based off of a 30-minute car ride because of the lack of resources that certain communities have and others don't. And
Wow.
it's to be a protector of our democracy. Our democracy is very fragile right now. And I think that in this watershed moment, which direction will we go? I think this could be the darkest hour or it could be our best. And I think it's going to be our best.
Wow, I love it. And I hope you're ready to barge into the intransigence that exists in Congress, because that's what I always think about. You get like these young whippersnappers like, well, I'm going to go and change. And then they run into the Dick Durbins and, Cory Booker and his 25-hour speech. And then he's posing with Benjamin Netanyahu. Dude, what are you doing? I'm just like, oh my gosh. So, I mean, that it's the power structure that needs to be broken up. So I'm rooting for you. And it was just really wonderful to talk to you this morning, Kina. Let's see, do we have any other questions before we hop off? Oh, Nicole's saying she knows someone who's survivor from Uvalde. Oh, yeah. Yeah, no. I mean, the gun violence thing is where many children, different colors, are being traumatized by ICE. Oh, yeah. I mean, that is the trauma that the ICE is inflicting on kids. It's like our American Holocaust going on right now.
And if your representative, sorry to that person who said that, if your representative or any of your representatives who you're watching are not talking about ICE and abolishing ICE and holding them accountable for what is happening across this country, primary them. Get them out of there. They are not lethal enough for this moment. We need people who are going to stand with communities, and everybody should care. The weirdest thing that happened was sitting on a phone call with gun rights groups as a gun violence survivor, right? Who were talking about what? Alex Preddy. a law-abiding legal gun holder who got illegally disarmed and had a whole clip pumped into his body. This is not that Donald Trump is just sending these folks out into blue cities. If it can happen to us, then it can happen to you. And that is the messaging that we are saying to everybody across the country. Your candidate, your congressional candidate, your state reps, your state senators, your governor, your mayor, your city council people, everybody should be talking about ICE and what we're going to do to hold them to account for their actions. And if they're not, get them out of there.
Yeah, we got to think hard here in Virginia because yeah, we need to dump some people. Although we are going 10-1
I know.
redistricting, led by an amazing Black woman, Louise Lucas. She's like, y'all, I love her. She is spicy as
Throwing
brick.
down.
I love her, but she wasn't afraid. People were like, oh, let's not. I mean, literally, I live in Virginia. Let's not be greedy. I'm like, what? We're at war. Are you kidding? Like, and Louise Lucas is like, we are going to the mat on this, and I just. Yeah, I want to applaud. I want to applaud you guys. Thank you so much for this time this morning. It was a pleasure speaking with you. I could talk to you guys all day, all these progressive candidates. So, I hope to have you back after the primary, and we'll see where things head in November. But good luck to you in your campaign, and thank you so very much, Keena Collins, for Illinois District 7. Let's see where this thing ends up, and we'll reconnect soon. Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks for joining, everybody. Bye. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.